Good evening and welcome to the Committee of the Whole meeting held December 13th, 2017, and we're opening at 7:03 p.m. And this is a call to order, and at this point we'll go on to number 2, the confirmation of agenda. Councillor Sobel.
I have nothing, Your Worship. Thank you.
Councillor Bauer.
I have nothing to add, Your Worship.
Councillor Montgomery.
I have nothing, Your Worship.
Councillor Cox.
Nothing, Your Worship.
Councillor Peterson.
Do 14 admin inquiries count, Your Worship? They're just under admin inquiries, right?
Sure.
Just, Jen has the admin inquiries.
Okay. And Councillor Corbeil.
Nothing, Your Worship.
And I have nothing. So we didn't amend that because you've already got it on there. So I'm looking for an adoption of the agenda.
I'll move adoption of that agenda, Your Worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Sobel. You've heard the motion. All in favor? Which brings us to item 3.1, delegation. And at this time, we'd like to call forward Ms. Sharon McCormick to discuss the sponsorship for the regional recreation facility.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Do I need the microphone?
Yes, otherwise people at home won't hear you.
Oh, okay. Great. Good evening, Council, and thank you for your time today to talk about the sponsorship plan for the Strathmore Motor Products Sports Centre. Pleased to provide you with an update and let you know how the project is coming along at a high level and where we are headed in regards to the sponsorship. My presentation is, there is no decision being asked of Council before you tonight, but I did want to bring you up to speed and provide you with some information and also ask for your support going forward as we continue in our efforts to gain more sponsorship for the facility. The Regional Recreation Facility is a $10 million project, which the town is one of the funding partners, along with Wheatland County and the Golden Hills School Division. As you may know, the recreation facility itself is about a 5,000 square meter facility. It contains 4 playing surfaces, 1 school gymnasium, 1 public gymnasium, lacrosse indoor soccer pitch, as well as a futsal pitch. And so futsal, if you're not familiar, is a 5-on-5 indoor soccer sport that is becoming quite popular as indoor soccer and outdoor soccer becomes one of the fastest growing sports around. In addition to that, on the second floor of the facility is a 1-kilometer walking track. And in addition to that, there are a couple of multi-purpose rooms, and the facility is being built with a 6-inch concrete floor so that it can accommodate trade shows, also incorporating vehicles that can be driven up onto the floor for those purposes, as well as hosting of events. The project is currently 40% complete, and it is on schedule to be completed for the end of September next year. This facility will deliver upon Council's identified priorities as part of the corporate strategic plan and also identified in the 2010 Quality of Life survey that was done. In that study, it was identified community needs for a walking track, for indoor field space, gymnasium space, and also wellness spaces. So this piece of infrastructure will deliver all of that and will be a great asset for the community in terms of being able to further develop those indoor sports. Attached to your report, you have a draft sponsorship plan for the Strathmore Motor Products Sports Centre. The purpose of that plan is to provide some direction and guidance to our efforts as we continue forward with sponsorship. I just want to kind of touch on a couple of the major steps and milestones. So obviously the project has been designed and is presently being built. The next step from that in about July of this past year was an asset identification and valuation. And what that means is doing an inventory of what we could possibly sell for fundraising purposes that would add to revenue that would either enhance or provide revenue for capital reserves as the needs for the users evolve over time, and also in terms of maintenance and upkeep of the building itself. So the identification of naming rights was identified at that time, and those in particular relate to naming of the facility itself, which, as everyone knows, has now been secured with Strathmore Motor Products. Naming rights are also underway with a number of other components of the building. The walking track, all of the other playing surfaces are potential for naming rights, as are the 4 change rooms, the shower rooms, and the scoreboards that are also in the facility itself. So there's a number of components in there that can be utilized in terms of securing additional revenue at this time. There are other components that could be also used for naming rights and advertising and other forms of fundraising as time goes by. At this point in time, we're focusing on the naming rights as a sponsorship. As I mentioned, the purpose of the sponsorship and of any fundraising is to help enhance the amenities that are provided within the facility itself. So in particular, a number of items were not included in the initial design and currently being built, which would be the first priority in terms of funding some of those items. Not that the building would be incomplete by any means when it's being opened, but they would certainly add additional value onto the into the facility. So some of those, for example, would be providing turf on the indoor soccer pitch and also on the futsal pitch as well. Boards for the lacrosse field could possibly be an addition if further revenue was generated from that. Paving of part of the parking lot is not currently identified in the initial project scope, so paving of the full parking lot might be something that could be undertaken. And in addition, equipment will also be needed for public use for the facilities. So the user groups using those facilities will have equipment for their own use, but equipment will be needed for public use, for instance, in the public gymnasium space. To date, the town started on naming rights in about July of this past year, as I mentioned. To date, about half of the prospective value of those components identified for naming rights has been or is in the process of being secured. So that's a great effort in a very short period of time. We have many other items left to sell, like some of the score clocks and some of the public playing surfaces, for instance, and the change rooms as well. Sponsorship is a great benefit not only to the town and the funding partners in terms of being able to enhance the facility itself, but it's also a benefit to the business community and to the community at large. It provides them an opportunity to gain exposure and visibility to align their brand and their businesses with an important piece of the community that they can invest in, and at the same time build those business relationships with others and aligning their own corporate or business values with health and wellness and children and families and the betterment of the community at a whole. So that's the premise that we offer the sponsorship opportunities. The approach that we are taking at present is to, or the approach that's been taken to date has been to contact local franchise businesses that are in Strathmore, as well as some of the independent businesses. Now that we have some of those being in the process of being secured and more to be named, we are moving into a direction as laid out in the sponsorship plan that will see many of the corporate and major suppliers and contractors that the funding partners currently utilize or conduct business with being undertaken. So some of those bigger corporations like the Tim Hortons and the banking community and those types of ones that have a strong presence in the business community here. Slightly different kind of process because they all, we have to go through their corporate organizations in terms to get there. So I know that the response time is going to be longer, so important that we get those proposals out and work their way through the systems. In addition to that, efforts are being made to identify some prominent families in the county and in the town itself, because sponsorship is not only a benefit to businesses, but it's also a benefit for people to leave a legacy in their community. And so we also want to be reaching out to those families as well that might have an interest at that level. And we are also reaching out to businesses that have a large employee base here in town. So that might be local businesses, larger businesses like Walmart, some of the oil and gas businesses, for example, might be some of those, as well as some of the larger businesses that might have a employee base here but be commuter employees. So those that are within kind of a catchment area of about 50 kilometers from Strathmore. So WestJet, for example, was one of those that was identified, where maybe large numbers of employees that are working here in Strathmore and commuting from Strathmore into Calgary to the airport area would be within kind of what's considered to be that driving distance. So we also want to identify and reach out to those as well. They can also be quite worthy in terms of sponsorship with the benefit for them being to attract other employees to their organizations and to give to the communities in which their employees are based. The next part that we will be moving into once the naming rights have been sold, so to speak, is to hold a cultivation event, and this is one of the asks for council that I would make, is to provide your support and champion some contacts with those business owners that you know, prominent families that you know in the area that you think might have an interest for sponsorship. We are organizing what we're referring to internally as a cultivation event. In other words, we want to gather together people that may have an interest in sponsorship. We're hosting the event on January the 11th at one of the homes that's for sale by Aquila Homes right next to the regional recreation facility, so that people have an opportunity to see the progress that's being made. And the progress is fast and furious with that, with the kind of design technology that they're using with those modular walls. It's certainly going up fast. So the purpose of this event would be to provide people with an update on the project, let them know what the opportunities are and what the values are for them to become a sponsor. Of course, all of council is invited. It's in your council calendar, and we're looking forward to having the mayor speak and provide some opening remarks, as well as inviting the council for Wheatland County as well to that event, and some of the name sponsors that will have their contract signed by that time. So it'll be a great opportunity to provide some peer-on-peer type speaking opportunities for those business owners that have some interest and want to hear more about what the sponsorship is about. Once the naming rights have been sold, we'll move into more community investment, and that's really where we open the doors to the residents of the town of Strathmore to be able to participate. Some of the smaller businesses may wish to participate at that point in time. We're not there yet, so we haven't designed and developed what that's going to look like, but just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about, that would be the stage where you'd see things like the buy a brick, those types of things where people can participate at lower kind of dollar values on a more individual basis as opposed to the bigger business. Might be opportunities for people, some of the service organizations and partner organizations to do things like name bleachers and that kind of stuff. Some of the smaller price tag items compared to something like the cost of naming the facility. And then the final stage in terms of fundraising will be the advertising. And the distinction between advertising and sponsorship is really just about dollar value and the terms of those agreements. So advertising is generally a 1 or 2 year term that you're committing to, and something under a $10,000 kind of price is the way that we are making the distinction for our purposes. Also in the sponsorship plan, you'll see fundraising source targets. They're a pie chart. So the purpose of the pie chart is really just to provide an order of magnitude for these different sources of fundraising and what they might contribute in terms of revenue sources that can be put towards the facility. Certainly naming rights is the biggest piece of the pie. Second to that potentially is prominent family names where, where if we are able to identify and the alignment is right in terms of a family wishing to give towards something that supports community health and wellness in the town can also be another large source of ongoing revenue. Other aspects there are the individual donors, holding events like galas, that kind of stuff. People, again, can participate, buy a table, do those types of things that provide ongoing sources of revenue and gain some recognition within the broader community. So just in closing, I had mentioned that the invitation is open to the mayor and to all council members here to attend the cultivation event on January the 11th. And I'd also like to ask for council support to help make those connections with either businesses or people here in town that may have an interest in sponsorship, and I'm at your service to help in whatever way that might work. So that might be just connecting me to someone you know by email, it might be attending an initial meeting with you, whatever you are able to offer in terms of that kind of support. Having a warm lead to someone for the purposes of sponsorship is far more fruitful than me making some cold calls to people that I don't currently have a relationship with. So it is an important part of sponsorship and of fundraising as a whole, and certainly adds great value in terms of the success that we'll all be able to accomplish from it. Happy at this time to take any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. And are there any questions from councillors? Deputy Mayor Sobel.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Ms. McCormick, for that. Sounds like everything's going well. I had an interesting question, I think just a little over a week ago, and I'm not sure if you or anyone else can answer that, but was there ever any consideration given to having any type of a juice bar or facility within the rec center in regards to juice or water, tea?
Talking like a canteen type?
Sort of like, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to refer to James.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I think there was some back and forthing on it. I think at this point, there won't be any actual retailer or a what would you call a franchise of some sort at this time. I don't think the facility has at this time is ready for that. If an individual group wants to do a fundraiser or to do something, there's the ability to do that, but not an actual franchisee that would go in like a Good Earth Coffee or something. It's not that kind of facility, not at this time anyway.
I can add a little bit of background onto why that decision was made. When we were first going into the initial designs, we talked a lot about putting in space for permanent rentals. It came down to design and cost. At that time, we had a very limited budget. We had no parameters around success for sponsorship in Strathmore since we'd never taken on such a project. And so we had to make some cuts to the project to keep within our 10 million, and that was one of them. But one of the innovative things we've done with this design and our partnership with the school is that groups who want to offer canteens or food services at events can utilize some school spaces, including their cafeteria style tuck shop, as well as their home ec room to offer those after-hours programs.
Thank you, Ms. Simpson.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Peterson?
I just had a question regarding whether or not we have a community-based communication plan that would look at discussing the positive social impact that's implicit in putting your name to buildings that are going to be in the community for half a century at least. And I haven't seen anything around communication specific to that, doing a decisive rollout on social impact and incentivizing the public in that term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm certainly working with a communication person here with the town. The two are very closely tied, you're right. To your question in regards to a communication plan, I'm going to have to defer to the CAO.
So just through the chair, we actually today are just in the process of retaining a regular comms person which is one of the initiatives that Jennifer's been working on. We're fingers crossed. I can't let anything more out of the bag right now, but assuming everything goes well, we will have a very good resource in-house that will be able to fill a gap, because right now we're renting services right now where we need it, but that we actually need something in-house. And so I should have some information for you next Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Councillor Montgomery.
Mine isn't so much a question as just to say thank you for all your efforts on this. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you,
I do
Councillor
have to say I
Montgomery.
can't take credit for the person who sold the naming rights and all the other big items.
I had just one question, and my question is, and maybe Ms. Simpson can bring light to this too. I just wanted to check and find out, is there still a commitment from some of the stakeholder groups? For example, has lacrosse committed to boards, or has minor soccer committed a certain amount of funds to the turf?
Yeah, so it's been a while since we've touched base with the user groups. The last 6 to 8 months have really been focused on getting the building up and running. And so our plan in the new year is to circle back with them. One of our asks of our user groups was to help us fund those unfunded project parts like the boards and turf. And so we had challenged each of them to come up with roughly $50K to put towards boards and the turf products. I'm not sure where they're at with that yet, but that's our plan for the new year, is to circle back and provide support to those initiatives.
Okay, so you'll be contacting them
Absolutely.
in discussions?
We're both looking at fundraising and grant opportunities to get us there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thackeray?
If I may, also, we'll be circling back shortly on giving council a more complete update on the project. There's a lot of, as Sharon said, things are moving really fast. There are some issues that we need to address, and we certainly we'll have some more information for you coming forward. So, but things are moving fast and furious on that building because they really want to be open by September of 18. So, yeah.
Thank you, James. And my last little question is, I know you have the date of January 11th for the cultivational event. Can I get the time again for that?
It's 4 till 5:30.
Thank you. And the location, sorry.
It's 726 Edgeview Crescent.
Okay. Okay, thank you for your presentation and your information. Very appreciated, very much appreciated. That brings us to item 4, the confirmation of minutes. If everyone's read through them, I'll be looking for a motion to. There is one thing I could add, is page 11. My last name was spelled incorrectly at the very start. So I don't think it's anywhere else, but it just stuck out because it was right at the beginning. So if we could have that adjustment. And then I'll be looking for a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
Your worship, I accept the minutes as amended.
Thank you. So you've heard the motion regarding the November 8th Committee of the Whole meeting minutes. All in favor? The motion is passed. And that brings us to our next item, which I see no members from Strathmore Minor Baseball, Ms. Sawatsky. So are we staying with the existing schedule then? Okay, thank you. So that brings us to item 6.1, Strathmore FCSS 3-year business plan on page 15 of your program.
It's the first time I've used that.
Bless you.
So, this evening we're here to present to you for some discussion our plan for a 3 to 5 year business plan for FCSS that we've been working on this year. This business plan will flow into about 2020, 2021 for this department. And most of the recommendations came out of that 2016 community needs assessment that the FCSS department and Strathmore United Way conducted. So let me just get organized. So just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. It's been a while since the needs assessment was in front of council, so we'll give you a really quick recap of some of the findings from that needs assessment. We'll talk about some of our current services and what's been accomplished in 2017, and then we'll look into the future, what our business plan will look like, and more specifically, what you'll see accomplished in 2018. The staff have been working really hard all year to roll this business plan out, and we have a couple of them here, so I just wanted to introduce them, as you may not know them. So Sandy is our FCSS admin assistant. She is our frontline, what do we call you? We call the Director of First Impressions, because she's the face everyone sees when they walk into our office. And Darlene is our FCSS programmer. She runs the majority of our programs, sits on a lot of boards in town, and is that contact for all of our clients and community partners. We have a couple other staff that couldn't be here today. Shannon from the youth club is sick and is at home, hopefully. And Tammy is our handy bus and FCSS supervisor. And so the whole team has been working on this, and we're pretty happy to finally bring it to you today. So quickly, one of the things that has changed this year, as you well know, is the structure. So we have a new structure within this organization, or this part of the organization. I'm happy to share that we have hired a social service coordinator who will be starting January 8th. Her name is Linda Bernicki, and she comes from the Edmonton area. She's got tons of FCSS experience with the city of Spruce Grove and Leduc County. She's also got some extensive experience working with the Indigenous communities up there, and has some great ideas that we're hoping to see implemented in our community. So you will see her face in the new year. So this part of the department has an equivalent of roughly 17 FTEs between our full-time, our part-time, and our casual workers. That includes all of the summer staff at the youth club, the home support staff, and the handy bus drivers. So just a quick recap on the needs assessment that we conducted in 2016. A SWOT analysis was done that really highlights some of the key areas of our community. This is fairly familiar. If you saw a SWOT analysis for communities of our size across Alberta, we like to think we're special, but we're pretty normal. We've got lots of great strengths in terms of the supports that we have in the community, our volunteerism, our churches. We've got some great assets with having a hospital and how close-knit this community is. But we have a lot of challenges as well. You'll see a lot of recurring themes between the needs assessment and our business plan around that affordable housing and funding and collaborative approach to social services for Strathmore. We really took a lot of the opportunities, and those are some of the priorities you'll see in our 3 to 5 year business plan, and really trying to focus on the bigger themed threats in Strathmore, especially around youth, addictions, and mental health. Those were the strong themes that came out of the needs assessment, as well as community consultation throughout this year while we were developing the business plan. So I'll be repeating myself a lot on some of those issues tonight.
Tracy, I don't see, is transportation, sorry, my little screen is on.
Yeah, so lack of affordable housing and homelessness. Transportation, you said. It didn't?
I just remember when TSI.
Lack of public transportation was identified.
That was the highest.
Absolutely. So the two areas that came out of the needs assessment that you're not going to see in our business plan are transportation and affordable housing. FCSS department is not resourced to tackle major issues like that. We're here to support those initiatives that come out of the town and other agencies, but we're not in a position to spearhead projects of that scope and scale. So a quick look at what's been going on in our offices this year while we bounce around Strathmore to various homes. We've run a handful of programs. We conducted 145 tax returns for low-income individuals and families in Strathmore. We provided roughly 250 trips through our volunteer driver program for 56 clients. A variety of food programs that are at a cost neutral to the community, and those are for everybody. They're not just low income and seniors. We supported 14 clients to get onto the Alberta Seniors Financial Program, and that's run by volunteers through our Seniors Advisory Committee and the Happy Gang. And we ran a joint partnership with Alberta Mental Health and Wheatland Further Ed to run the Compass Caregivers Program this year. All of these programs will continue into 2018 in some form or another, and they've all been fairly successful this year. Does anyone have any questions on these programs before we move on?
I do, but
Okay, we can wait. We're going to be talking about the home support program later on this evening, so I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, but this is just a number of how many clients we service. We've split it out based on single and couples and based on their income levels of that threshold that we've been talking about. So as you can see, we have about 70, 80 clients that we support that are under that annual income threshold, and then about 68 that are over it that we're going to be talking about at a later date. And these are people who require services for cleaning, lawn care, shopping, companion care, and all of those light duties that our home support workers provide. And lastly, for 2017, we hosted a few, or we partnered for a few events and hosted a few. And so you can see some of the attendance there. All of these programs, except Senior Power, will happen again next year. Senior Power is an every 2 years program, and then next year we'll see the Women's Conference coming back, and we help support that program through the Rural Health Partnership.
Can I ask you a question about your previous slide?
Absolutely.
Is that 44,335? Should that be 33,000?
Yeah, the last line should be 44,335.
Okay, I see.
My apologies.
Okay. All right, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. I would say one of our big successes coming out of this year is our Seniors Week. We've been growing that over the last couple of years, and this year we saw some really great growth in terms of the seniors lunch that we hosted, as well as the information day where we brought seniors together to educate them on a variety of different things, and the poverty simulation that some of you may have participated in as a United Way partnership. And we're going to be bringing that back again next year.
Tracy, could I ask a
hopefully.
question about
Yes.
the Go Girl program? I see that it's partnered with the Youth Club of Strathmore and Strathmore High School. So that's the one that the Youth Club runs. Is that separate to the EYES program?
Yeah, this was the first time we've hosted the Go Girl, and it's funded by a grant that we get from a nonprofit, an NGO, and it's all about empowering girls to participate in physical activity, improve their social skills, and it was a small event this year. We got it off the ground, and we're hoping to grow it next year, but it's fully funded by an outside source.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So we also do grant funding out of the FCSS office, as you're aware. This just highlights what we've put out the door in 2016 and 2017. 2017, we saw our first long-term funding agreement come to council, and it was with Growing Family Society to provide roughly $15,000 per year over a 3-year or a 4-year period, 2017 to 4 years down the road. This is a model that we're really happy with, and we're going to be looking at that model into the future. Our 2018 grant period has closed. We're reviewing them right now, and we will be bringing recommendations for our 2018 grants to council in January. In 2017, we also provided a variety of in-kind services, anywhere from printing services, facility donations for events and fundraisers, to our staff sitting on boards to help with society boards or event boards or special events. It's a big chunk of Sandy's time is helping facilitate some in-kind services. Okay, so now we're going to get into the business plan. So our business plan consists of 5 key priorities that we've identified.
Maybe I should ask my question before.
Sure.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you. So before we start, I think one of the things that this council has been very interested in terms of going through budget is what the total budget is in this term, in this year.
For 2017,
Well, 2018.
2018.
2017 is spent.
Yeah. I don't have the budget in front of me, but I can pull it up.
I guess
Yeah.
that's a question, and a
It-
second question that I have is, I think that when we went through the budget, we determined that about 80% of our servicing costs in the FCSS were staffing.
Not quite 80%.
78%, yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought that when we talked about the Go Girl funding, that the program, but not the staffing was covered.
Not the staffing, just the program expenses. But we ran it with very little staff because we used volunteers. Yeah.
And so when we're talking about this strategic plan, we're talking about the youth program and the FCSS?
We're talking mostly about FCSS. There's a few parts in here about the youth club since they're closely tied. And you'll see that as we go through, we highlight which parts are specific to the youth club. And mostly it's around getting that business plan and that review of youth club programming. And so it's not, youth club's not all of it, but it's parts of it. And you'll understand it more once we go through.
So Your Worship, I'm willing to wait for that. I guess I have a huge feeling of unease in all of this because we've had many, many conversations around this from a philosophical perspective. And this isn't what I'm seeing here today at all. One of the things, I guess, that, Your Worship, that surprises me is that, we had talked about service delivery model shifting significantly. That came out of the TSI report as well. And we talked about service delivery models being philosophically driven through the vision of council. I don't see that here. I don't see it. And I'm disappointed that this presentation isn't in front of us, and my screen isn't working. And so I just want to say for the record, I was surprised tonight to see a new social services director come on board. I understand that that's an operational decision, but it's also one that impacts the budget significantly, and a budget that we had, at least that I have, said that I am significantly and concerned about, both on the youth club side and on the FCSS side, in terms of our budget overruns.
So in terms of the budget, the 2018 budget is proposing $130,000 of town taxpayer dollars going to FCSS. The rest of the budget is funded
Yep.
by our Government of Alberta grant. The home support program that we're going to be talking about later is going to bring some of those costs down, and we will.
Some of the costs in home support will be coming down.
Yeah, and that'll come out of the town's contribution to the FCSS
Thank you.
program.
Councillor Peterson, if I could follow up your question and just ask one back. Are you hoping or are you hoping that we'll be able to still have time to take one last look at budget regarding FCSS funding and the move forward?
I don't think that there's time for that, quite frankly, at this point. But I do hope that there is significant input and opportunity in strategic planning.
Okay, Mr. Thackeray?
If I may, I think one of the issues, and it's tricky to discuss, is the service model, and I've asked Tracy to look at how we can really rationalize the budget in FCSS, and I think there's some good thinking. We're just not ready, I don't think, to open it up because there's some pretty significant implications, and we could certainly talk about some of those things in closed session, but we're just not at liberty to talk about them here. But
Okay,
they would
thank you.
make a substantive difference to the budget.
Councillor Peterson?
I guess I would ask which way.
Free up a lot of money.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you, Worship. So my question is just with regards to the funding model. The amount of money we get from the province, is that kind of independent of how much money we put in? So could we run this entirely off of the province of Alberta?
No. Our funding agreement with the province requires us to put 20% to match their 80%.
Okay.
Right now, in 2017, we're higher than 20%. We're at about 28, 29% matching. So we're going above what we're required to, but we have to put dollars in to match, to get their grant.
Why would we be above 20%?
It's a great question. That's the model that we've done in the past. By reevaluating the home support program and some of the changes, we're going to be bringing that down to that 20%.
Okay, so it's not like, we have a total budget of $1 million and they give us 800,000. It would just be.
No, so they give us roughly about 300,000. It's like 306 and change, and we have to match that with 20%.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And their funding is based on what's supposed to be based on per capita, but it's based on what they're budgeted and then based on community size.
That's about 2,000.
Yes, yeah, and it's slowly getting dwindled at the government of Alberta level. So we're expecting that amount to decrease in the future.
Which is ironic because they increased it for the first time 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And it hasn't increased for many years.
It's a fairly poorly funded program in the
Yeah,
Alberta government.
there's a more complicated, how do I get? There's more to this that we can drill into, that'll get explained more what's been going on. But it's a real catch-up right now. I don't know if that's a fair.
Yeah, I think that's very fair, and I would say that there's still some things we're sorting out. When Strathmore made the choice to split 5 years ago from Wheatland FCSS, while the decision was in the best interest of the community, I would say it was done without a strategic plan, and so we're playing catch up, and we're trying to correct some errors that were made in the past that have had 5 years of impact on the way we operate. And so it's I think as Bob said earlier, it's a slow moving change for this department. And we also have to remember that we deal with a lot of vulnerable populations, and change is even more difficult for those people. And so we have to be really delicate when we change our program criteria, as well as or eliminate programs altogether if that's the direction we're going. It's not a simple change, and so we have to be conscious of that.
Okay,
If I may, would it be possible to move in camera at some point this evening?
Just checking with Ms. Sawatsky, that's doable? Okay. Just from myself, if I could direct a question to Ms. Sawatsky, and that is, would you need an administrative request along the lines of Councillor Peterson's comments regarding having the FCSS added to strategic planning session that we're going to do in January? It is on there as an agenda item? Okay, thank you. Councillor Corbeil.
I have a quick question on some of the services we supply, like over and under that amount. How much are some of those clients over? Like,
Significantly,
okay.
yes. More than double.
Your worship, I'd move to go in camera.
You've heard the motion? Sorry?
You'd have to rise and come out of
Right.
committee and then.
Sorry, I forgot. Yep.
Sorry.
Or did you want to do that, Councillor
Yes,
Peterson?
I would make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to rise and come out of committee of the whole. All in favor? And then we have a motion to go in camera.
Yes, I would move to go in camera.
Councillor
Your worship.
Peterson makes a motion to go in camera. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? for a motion to go back into committee of the whole. Yes? Oh, okay. Okay. Awkward silence.
We can't do anything without Jennifer. Not only appropriate, it's encouraged.
Yes, yes.
The more the merrier.
That's good to know for next time.
I'll bring the tray and I'll set it.
Ah, now we're talking. It is committee of the whole.
Yeah, just set it right in front of Pat, pass it around.
Oh, everybody. The 2 viewers?
We have 2 viewers.
I do like the scarf.
Thank you.
Let's start back. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good scarf. I'm gonna start bringing back Marcos for my vacations.
Yeah.
Every week you bring something back from.
If you're bringing stuff from home, it better be in a car.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I got a list of one.
Yeah, I can give you a list of places that I really like.
Oh, thanks.
I don't need any more.
Pardon me?
Oh, I've already.
Oh, let me check.
No, thank you.
You've already eaten. You should stop.
Were you already?
It was not good.
It was not a proud display.
It was a display of weakness.
It was my dinner.
I'm gonna tell you a secret is.
You don't drink. You get some of that at home.
For public service, we have plenty of wine. No, I'm not good old fashioned beer guy.
Yeah. Dead boys.
Ale or lager?
Inexpensive.
Lager.
Go to Bend, Oregon, that's where you want to go.
I'll entertain a motion for a 5-minute recess.
So moved.
All in favor? God bless you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? We are now back in the Committee of the Whole meeting. And Tracy, welcome back,
Thank you.
although you never left.
Okay, so as we move into the proposed business plan for FCSS, I'll explain how it's laid out. So the overarching theme that we hope is apparent is that we want to make the FCSS department a hub, a resource center, and the center of the wheel to support those in the community that are doing the real work hands-on in the social services. And so we have 5 priorities laid out to help us achieve that vision. We don't have the resources to be social services in Strathmore, but we can be the resource that supports all the people who are helping people in our community. So I'll go through our 5 key priorities. Each priority has key results and key goals that we have set for ourselves, as well as council and administration. So the first key priority is around collaboration and having a better model for collaboration at the FCSS department. We need to, a goal is to strengthen our relationships with our local agencies. We have some really strong relationships in the community and others that need some significant work. So one of the main things we're proposing is the creation of a program called Community Connector Meetings. And these are our workforce meetings that focus on actionable items addressing current issues in the community. And so while FCSS isn't resourced to tackle something like affordable housing, for example, we could help pull the people who are together, help collaborate on funding and policy development and lobbying to the government, and be that connector of all those people to help accomplish tasks in the community. So the community connector meters are going to be annually, depending on the needs of that year or what we project for goals for that year. And we'll talk more about what the 2018 goals for that program is a little bit later. We're going to continue our participation in the interagency meetings and participation on local boards, agency boards. Right now, we're taking a look at what boards we sit on, what value does that bring to both FCSS and to the board itself, and what other areas that should we be involved in. We're also going to take the 100 cups of coffee approach to relationship building and starting one-on-one meetings with all agencies and all programs in Strathmore to help find out ways that we can support them, ways that they can use us as a resource, and how we can build that relationship moving forward. Other areas of collaboration is to strengthen our relationship with Wheatland FCSS. This is a rebuilding project, not just at the staff level, but with the council here and the WFCSS Board of Directors. To see success in both of our programs, joint partnerships around projects and programming is essential. Cross-promoting of our individual programs and collaboration on joint projects is a goal we've set for a 3 to 5 year framework. We've also established already, we've started this year, is bi-monthly meetings with our staff and their staff to find ways that we can support each other. So we're taking steps in the right direction, I think. The last piece of collaboration is that funding model. Creating a stable, consistent external funding model that aligns with the council strategic plan as well as the needs of the community. We need to develop policy and procedure around how we fund people and what we fund for. How do we track those fundings? One of the things that we have to do every year for our GOA funding is we have to provide a report back on what their dollars did. And if we're giving Government of Alberta dollars out, we need to make sure we're tracking how they're impacting the community so we can then report it back to the government. And we don't have a clear system on how to do that yet, and so that's going to be part of the funding model. Additionally, we want to look at long-term funding. We see the same people in our grant program year after year, and we're wasting their resources and our resources, making them reapply year after year for the same dollars. And so we want to go to 3 and 5 year funding models to support these groups that are doing really great work. So the second key priority is that one-stop shop philosophy around being a key resource center for the community, not just as a physical location, but in terms of a web presence and a community connector. So one of the key priorities that we want to see is a comprehensive user website, not just a town website, but an FCSS community resource website that's obviously linked to our town site, but is independent and has a thorough, comprehensive resource database where if you're looking for any kind of support in this community, that's your one stop and you can find it there. Everything from mental health, addiction, family, youth, health. We want everything in one place. Community Resource Guide ties in with the website as well as the one-stop shop. One of our goals for 2018 is going to be inventorying the services in town. What's actually available, not just within the Strathmore boundaries, but in our neighboring communities, and what's accessible in the city that you can use here in Strathmore. Because of our size, not everything's offered in Strathmore, but what can people access in the city and how can we help facilitate that access and connection for what they really need? So creating a really in-depth resource guide that can be used for our website database, to do a printed booklet to places like the Lodge and senior centers, and then a condensed agency guide to make sure everybody knows about what's happening in the community. That one-stop shop mentality is not limited to just our FCSS staff. There's only 3 of us in the office, and we're not the be-and-all of social services in Strathmore. So we want to educate our internal staff about who we are and what we do. So we're proposing a lunch and learn program over the next few years to educate all of our staff in the town of Strathmore about FCSS services, but this also is going to tie into the youth club. So they understand what the youth club is, who they are, and how it can help. We want to have more of a presence on some of our internal processes like the intranet, educating our frontline staff, and including some FCSS stuff in our onboarding with new employees through our HR program. One of the kind of overarching goals of the one-stop shop and education program is at the end of 5 years, we want everybody to know what FCSS, not just what it stands for, but what they actually do and know how to direct people to get the help that they need. And then obviously the one-stop shop needs to be a physical resource center. We want to make sure we're creating a safe, private, and accessible office that people feel comfortable coming and asking for help. And then having a comprehensive information center in that physical location. The third key priority falls around youth and family support. I think I've mentioned this before, we're not in the capacity to offer mental health, something like mental health support, but we can help facilitate access to these resources. But before we can do that, we need to know what's out there in the community, and so tying in a bit with the one-stop shop is identifying what mental health resources and addiction resources are in Strathmore. Where are the gaps or where are the perceived gaps? Sometimes it's all about perception or people not knowing how to access resources. Doing some really extensive research into what the needs are in this community, and this is huge collaboration with community partners. This is not us doing research, this is going out there with 100 cups of coffee, learning what organizations are doing, learning what resources they need, and then if we can't help them, finding ways to get them the help that they need through town council, through provincial government, through the federal government, whatever is needed. And then increasing how we can help access mental health. So training our staff, our frontline staff at FCSS on what are the indicators of mental health and addictions and how do they help those people when they walk through the door, because sometimes it's not really simple or nor is it clear cut. We need to develop a training program and figure out what needs to be in that training program so that we can be as helpful as possible. And then improve our capacity to support the people in our community who are helping mental health and addictions in Strathmore. And then increasing how we can help access mental health. So that was weird.
Deja vu.
Bob. This is where the youth club really ties into the business plan. We want to develop, as we've talked about in previous budget meetings, is a youth club business plan. So going through a complete cost-benefit analysis, means testing with our existing programs, community consultation with other youth service providers in Strathmore, looking at a balance between recreation and outreach, prevention and intervention, as well as what partnerships are out there and formalizing those partnerships so we have a more sturdy support system, funding model, and program delivery for the youth club. We've mentioned this before, the youth club's only been in the town for a few months now. Moving a program from a nonprofit realm to a municipal realm is difficult. The rules change drastically, and so we want to make sure that we do that transition without impacting the people in the community who rely on those services. And then similar to the mental health and addictions, We want to do the same with family and youth supports. What are the available resources? Where are the gaps and the perceived gaps? And how can we help facilitate more resources and access to the resources in our community? The fourth priority revolves entirely around communication, and it ties to every other key priority that we have. We have no communication strategy going out into the community, so that's our first goal is to come up with a strategic communication strategy for FCSS. Once we have an in-house communication specialist, we're excited to look at what tools are available to us, what are the best tools to reach our audience, since we deal with a lot of vulnerable populations and seniors. Maybe the traditional methods aren't the best, and so what else is available for us, and how can we be really efficient with our communication? Obviously, the website's going to play into our communication plan. We want to improve our communication with council, so we're committing to a minimum of quarterly updates on both the FCSS progress and youth club progresses throughout the years. That can increase or decrease depending on your requests, but that's kind of our threshold that we're proposing to council. We want to improve our communications internally, like we've talked about, educating our staff about who we are and what we do, and sharing our successes across departments, doing regular updates at staff meetings, and making sure our department is part of the town. And then the big part is external communication, making sure our partners know what we do and what we can help them with, what resources they have access to. Really focusing on cross-promotion of programs and events. Communication and our advertising is usually the most expensive part of any program or event. And if we can provide resources to those areas, that's such a simple way to help our partners achieve their goals. And then annual updates on the business plan to the community. We're going to be proposing one time a year at the beginning or the end of the year, whatever works best, to update on what we've accomplished the past year, what we're proposing into the future, and how that impacts what they're doing in the community. And lastly, we want to increase public awareness. When we look into 3 and 5 years into the future, what we see as a goal for increased awareness is we want to see an educated population. We want to walk down the street and talk to Joe Blow off on the street and ask them if they know what FCSS is. If you went out there today, people wouldn't know. So that's the goal. We want people to know. Whether they need our services or not, everybody should know what we do and how to access the resources in this community. So targeted communication campaigns, open houses, resource guides, and all the tools that we've talked about previously, we want to make sure that people know that they're there. It's not good use of money if we create programs that nobody knows how to utilize. The final priority is looking internally, and a lot of these things we've already started, looking at our organizational structure and making it more efficient. One of the strategic things that we've done with the organization of this department is combining the Handy Bus, the Youth Club, and FCSS all together to ensure that those programs are not only working together, but they're not duplicating services in the community, and how can they work together to make sure we're offering the best service possible. And then program levels. What service level and service model do we want for all of our programs at FCSS, big and small? How do we establish those program criteria, and then developing policy along with council on what that looks like into the future? So that's our 3 to 5 year plan. It's ambitious. It's also a working document. So even though at some point it will be adopted by council, it's open to change based on the needs and the trends in the community. Things can change quickly in the economy and in Alberta, and so we want to make sure that we're also adaptable and our program isn't rigid, and so that we're not meeting the needs of our community. So looking into 2018 specifically, we're proposing to host 5 community connector meetings that are going to focus on that inventory development, inventorying all the services for youth, seniors, families, mental health, and addictions in the community. We want to look at establishing a long-term funding model instead of annual grants. The goal is to have that launched for our 2019 grant program, and so we can change the way we do grants in the 2019 budget. We want to establish and distribute the community resource guide. We want to start launching 10 lunch and learns with our staff. and that will include FCSS and Youth Club Lunch and Learns. We need to develop an FCSS training program, the Youth Club business plan, an FCSS communication strategy that fits in with the overarching Town of Strathmore communication strategy, and a program review, making sure that all of our programs are efficient, relevant, sustainable, feasible, and effective. So we're open to any more questions or discussions that you'd like to have.
Are there any questions from councillors? Many thanks. Yeah, I echo Councillor Peterson's comment. Appreciate all the work you've done and your staff and administration. I've had a chance to work with a lot of your staff in fundraising, and I know how dedicated they are in the various areas, but thank you for all the work you've put in the time. We look forward to discussing this more at the strategic planning event.
Great.
Thank you. Brings us to item 6.2, FCSS Home Support Program Policy. Have we,
Can we bring it back?
sure. Do we need a motion?
Yes.
No, we don't in committee of the whole, do we? No. Okay. Perfect.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say, way to go Tracy, way to go team.
Yeah.
Really awesome job. It's really, really privileged to work with these guys.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Item 6.3, the Strathmore Recreation Facility Development Committee, and it's on page 29 of the agenda. 21 of the agenda, sorry. Tracy, welcome back.
Thanks. So, as requested by council, we're bringing forward a draft terms of reference for a recreation facilities development committee. This committee is open to discussion on how we want to structure it and what the goals are, but this is our recommendation. Let me just find it. Well, since I looked at it, the mandate of this committee will be to assist council with the development of a recreation facility master plan and long-term recreation development strategy. Some of the key functions that they'll have is they will assist with research gathering of best practices, regional recreation standards, industry standards, innovative development ideas, and bring those to the table to roll into a development and master plan. They'll help assist the facilitation of local stakeholder engagement to gather local knowledge. What are the current trends in our community and surrounding area, and what are the future development needs? They will act as an advisory committee to council to advocate for recreation facility development and provide advice on recreation development strategies and champion collaborative recreation development. So what we're proposing is that 2 members of this Strathmore Council will sit on this committee. We will invite 1 member of Wheatland County Council, 1 member from Golden Hill School Division, and 1 member from the Christ the Redeemer School Division to also sit on the committee, as schools do play a large role in recreation master planning. We'll invite 2 or more, if council so wishes, local sport group representatives, 2 from the local arts and culture groups, 1 member at large, and we'll provide 2 staff as support to the committee. So are there any comments, questions?
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you. I think this is fantastic. One of the things when, even back as far as when we visited the actual building sites before we built the East Wheatland, East Strathmore project, was that in developing recreational facilities and in facility development, I had great opportunity to talk to John Bowerman and to Drumheller, to Tom Zareski, and to the Mayor of Okotoks, to Bill. And all of them said that a critical factor in moving forward on a recreation master plan was to be able to define recreation. And they said without that, things went awry. And so I don't necessarily need to see that in a mandate, but it's a pretty important consideration moving forward.
So when we go to start the creation of or down the road to a recreation master plan, that's definitely going to be one of the first few steps that we have to do. And I think council is going to play a key role in defining what they consider recreation for Strathmore.
I just want to say, by the makeup of your membership, it's tacitly implied already what it is, and I really appreciate that, but I just, their experience was pretty valuable. They said that was sometimes pretty knock down, drag 'em out.
It's not the easiest thing to define.
And it's interesting when you look at those facilities, it's pretty interesting, the broad base.
Thank you, Councillor Peterson. Councillor Sobel, Deputy Mayor Sobel.
Oh, Councillor's fine. What I like about this is the general direction that it's got, the non-specific direction that it's going. So it's opening up to so much, and this is a committee that I can see being in our community for a long time. However, having said that, clearly, one of the things that has been on many people's minds and in social media, et cetera, is the development of a third body of ice, another skating rink for additional hockey, a hockey facility. So I'm assuming that this committee would have the ability to, if they so agree upon, to direct their efforts towards a goal of that type. Is there anything stopping them from identifying that and doing necessary research and supplying that to administration?
I don't believe so. Yeah, I think they could do that.
I just think it's something that,
Yeah.
this is open. I've read the functions, the members' responsibilities, and it seems to me that as long as they vote as a committee, that this is a priority, and
Yeah.
I'm assuming it could or should be or would be, whatever, that they can take some action in regards to supporting administration with information and possible fundraising abilities in that regard.
So I would see this committee working very closely with whomever we hire to do our recreation master plan, and they can help facilitate that process. And out of that master plan, we're going to see what the needs are of Strathmore, and more than likely, ice is going to be at the top of that list. And then from there, I think you have lots of options. This committee can focus on that, or other committees can be formed to focus on more specific fundraising and development of a specific project. One of the reasons we left it, or I left it, a bit more big picture is so it is long-term. And so once we get an ice rink built or a couple more diamonds, it's still there and it's still continuing to grow recreation in Strathmore.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I can definitely see from this terms of reference that you have looked at all the stakeholders that are representative for a recreation facility. But when we look down at local sport group representatives, you only have 2 identified. I was wondering, could we perhaps broaden that? Because we're not just looking at 2 groups using that facility. And if I was to think of Strathmore as a whole, we have so many more than just 2 groups representative in terms of our local sport. So would you be open to adding more members on that committee?
Absolutely, we can add more members. The only caution I would add is that the larger your group, the more difficult it is to function as a group. But we can add more sports groups or more arts and culture groups or whatever you so choose. Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just as a note to Lorraine, remember that we do have a lot of groups that have just gotten a new facility that won't be interested in that anymore, right? That's right. Like, they'll come back, but for the next few years, they'll be satisfied in their spot.
I was just thinking, sorry.
Sure, go ahead, Councillor Bauer.
Your Worship, I was just wanting to go back to the comment that Councillor Peterson had on that this is about community recreation, and it's about going forward, what is our definition of recreation? And so I would just want to not limit ourselves in going forward on this types of committees. That's basically my.
Mr. Thackeray, maybe you'd like to interject?
If I may, I think we were just looking at the proposed draft terms. Could we, I take Councillor Bauer's suggestion, we'd like to have an odd number on the group, and I think it would be really, it's better, because there has to be a consensus. If it's an even number, it's really hard, because you can get a split right down the middle.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why
Yeah.
a lot of groups are odd numbers, so if we'd like to take you up on that
Absolutely.
suggestion, if that's okay. And if you're okay, we'll make that amendment as when we bring it back to council
Yep.
for your consideration and adoption.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Thanks.
Thackeray. Councillor Peterson?
Yeah, I was just going to point out that there's 12 people.
Yeah.
But also that any such membership has the capacity, as the director pointed out, to set up an ad hoc committee. They can bring other people in at will.
Absolutely, yeah. So just a quick point of order that the town staff will be non-voting members. They'll just be support. So there'll be 11 voting
Okay.
members and 2 support.
Thank you, Tracy, for that clarification. Are there any other questions? Mr. Thackeray, comments? No? I just wanted to say that I had originally envisioned a more specific council committee, or a committee that was more specific, but Councillors Sobel and Peterson have made me realize that there's definitely more to recreation than just an ice surface, and for long-term planning, this would be great. And I think, as Councillor Peterson just said, like you mentioned earlier, you can have an offshoot committee that can focus specifically on something else.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate the effort, and I'll look forward to having it come forward before us. Thank you.
Great.
Which brings us to item 6.4, snow removal policy. This isn't you, Tracy?
Tracy's welcome to speak on this on my behalf. We'll just cue this up here. Maybe. The 79th time I do this, I will figure out how to turn that on. Thanks, Matt.
Probably time for you to hit the mic as well.
You know what? We'll stand that extra step back today. Thank you, Your Worship, members of the committee. Before I begin, I will take this brief indulgence to introduce the town of Strathmore's newest staff member, Mr. Craig Nichols, late out of the Lower Mainland in British Columbia, has started on Monday as the town's new operations manager. I believe that's the title. So Craig will be overseeing both sort of the operations department, which sort of what we used to colloquially refer to as parks and public works. So Craig will be dealing with, among other matters, snow clearing, maintenance, all those sorts of issues. So I do regret to inform the committee that they won't get to hear me talk about snow after this, but we will, just in the interests of giving Craig a soft beginning. I'll sort of take counsel through this workshop. So, of course, the committee will recall there's been a lot of discussion about snow clearing and sort of the town's policies towards snow clearing this year. I think the first snows of the year hit hard and fast and exposed some imperfections in the town's ability to respond to big snow events. So as part of that, staff are working to develop a new snow clearing policy for Strathmore. And sort of in the interests of workshopping this with council, staff are bringing forth sort of 7 key issues to discuss with the committee today to get guidance on. With those items, with the guidance the group gives staff, we'll come back in early January with a complete policy for council to consider and either adopt or amend. So the goal of this session is really to get get the committee, I will get that right eventually too, get the committee's input on some really key issues, as well as sort of generalities at the end. So we'll be going through this with, as I say, a series of very pointed questions. There we go, eventually. All right, there we go. So yeah, the goal is to sort of come out with the information we get out of the committee with this meeting and bring that to a completed policy for the first meeting in January there. That way as well, Craig will get that opportunity to take a look at the department functionality and department capacity as well as any budget implications. And town staff will be able to put a really good, something that really should address the concerns and really provide the level of service that council and the committee are expecting. So the current policy we have right now, and I think one of the real issues that arose during the real fundamental review of the policy is it's sort of, it conflates operational and policy issues. So on the one hand, the policy talks about sort of high level of servicing issues and then also discusses what the precise mixture of the pickle mix is in terms of sand and salt. So one of the key things that council will see with the new policy is it splits out sort of the goals. So those high level servicing levels, expectations, what are the expectations of the public as expressed by council putting on the town, and then sort of a procedures which will be put together by staff detailing, for example, what we'll call the tactics, the how those servicing expectations are met. So the discussions today are going to be centered on sort of those high-level policy goals as well, and we'll talk about this a little at the end as the town brings forward or engages that new communications person. We'll talk about sort of a two-pronged approach to communications on snow clearing. So that sort of sets the stage for these discussions. Is always the caveat being any direction council gives today, council can change when the policy comes up. This is just really going to help staff put together the framework document. We can always make changes. So we're just looking for that high-level guidance. So the first real issue, and this is one that comes up a lot, is the notion of what is the trigger for plowing snow? At what point does the town of Strathmore deploy snow clearing operations? Right now, the current policy is 3 centimeters, or because I'm somewhat older than I look, 1 inch is sort of that trigger. A number of communities have moved to 4 centimeters as that trigger. So that would be, when there's sort of 4 centimeters of snow onto the roadway, that's when plows deploy. Alternatively, there was discussion about tying it to Alberta transportation as the trigger. So saying, rather than putting in a number by the town, sort of looking at the town will begin plowing our streets when Alberta transportation begins plowing Wheatland Trail. Staff are still sort of looking at 3 centimeters as that trigger, but again, wanted to discuss with this committee if that is the appropriate number.
Above my purpose.
I round. I'm an economist by trade, I round.
Councillor Sobel.
Thanks. If I could, my concern with depending on Alberta Transportation's actions on Wheatland Trail is they have a broken down truck on the highway. There could be 9 inches there before we decide to do something. So I kind of like the number of 3 centimeters, which is that just approximately 1 inch, eh?
Just over 1 inch.
Yeah.
It's new math.
Yeah.
Alberta Transportation's current policy is 3 centimeters.
Yeah.
Their current contract is 3 centimeters as well. just
Good,
for reference.
okay. Yeah.
That's good. Councillor Corbeil.
Thanks, Your Worship. I do like a number as well, because just because they're out, we might not see them. So they might not get to that road fast. I don't want to depend on someone else to go out before we do. I think we should be our own judge of how the roads are and everything else. I like a number. I like 3.
Thank you, Councillor Corbeil.
All right. Oh.
Councillor Montgomery.
So this is basically saying that if we didn't receive, if we only got 2 centimeters of snow, we wouldn't send anything out? Okay. And do you guys track projected snowfall at all? So if it says it's gonna be 20 centimeters dropped, does that affect your policy?
Your worship, with regards to that, absolutely. So, staff does track Environment Canada forecasts, and if the news is saying, there's going to be a 20 centimeter dump coming, they're mobilized already. This is, to an extent, it's just to provide a defensible number or approach in the policy so that staff can defend whether an action, the town can defend whether an action was taken or not. But yeah, if there's a snow advisory or weather advisory, or even as we were sort of going today, looking at the forecast to plan public works or operations strategies for the week, we pay a lot of attention to that weather forecast.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. I just would echo the other councillors who've spoken. I think the consistency as far as 3 centimeters, if that's what Alberta transportation standards are, I think that's a good move for us.
Perfect. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
members of the committee. Sort of the next step here is this notion of levels of service. So these are sort of how the town breaks roads into sort of the priorities. So right now the town uses sort of an older system where we have emergency roads, priorities 1, 2, 3, 4.
Currently, we use emergency road, priority 1, priority 2, school. Priority 3.
Priority 3,
Well,
and
we don't-
walkways
one of the
and
things I think
sidewalks.
we got, some of the comments we got back from the public was, emergency road, is that before priority 1 or after priority 1? Like, these are like little things that, people are asking about, so we're just trying to get this clarified.
Emergency routes from the fire station, the only part is about 400 meters that is considered an emergency route, but then it turns into a level 2 road after that on Lakeside Boulevard, which is kind of counterintuitive. They main routes for all emergency services from the fire, EMS, police, all those major routes should be done at once. Because if we can't get equipment, we're in trouble.
So based on that, sort of the levels of service that staff were looking at, and again, talking to council about, is this notion of the level runs, which would be those emergency routes, and then the arterial roads, so sort of those key inter-neighborhood travel paths, Thomas, Brentwood, that sort of thing. So those would be the overwhelming first ones. Once those are knocked down, and the key here is sort of, once they're knocked down, plow staff would move on to the second priorities, with the caveat that if snow comes back up over 3 centimeters on those level 1 routes, they go back. So, they complete plowing level 1, move on to level 2, but may have to move back to level 1 if snow is just coming down at such an extent that, so those would be the key, and I will pass around the map after this discussion, so council has the idea. I just want to talk about sort of the high-level generalities here. Level 2 would be the major collectors, downtown commercial, and this is one we're going to come back to. Local drainage roads, this is sort of a caveat. A number of roads in town, if they aren't plowed, start causing flooding issues, so that's the caveat there. And school zones on school days. Now, the key one here that we'll come back to is this notion of downtown versus other commercial streets, and what constitutes the downtown, and we've received some citizen communications about that. So, finally, level 3 being that regional collector. I actually should have written minor collector there. That's my apologies there. Minor collector roads, so sort of the inner neighbor thoroughfares, industrial and service commercial, and then the town parking lots. So that does establish that industrial service commercial areas as being the lower priority to downtown. And then finally, sort of what we call the non-priority roads that wouldn't get plowing service except during special cases, so the local roads and the lane roads. So that's the proposed hierarchy. It's similar to what the town has now, except it makes clear that there's no sort of special emergency case. There is also, would be a caveat in the policy where if the town receives sort of a request from an emergency service, if the Mounties, for example, put in their request that something be plowed right away, obviously that becomes a higher priority. But sort of barring any emergencies, that would be the levels of service. Now, I think the big one here, and the one we kept coming back to, is downtown. Is that a higher priority than sort of what I'll call service, commercial, and industrial. Traditionally, it has been, but we have heard in the past concerns that business owners feel that, you know, in the industrial areas, that they aren't getting the level of service that downtown does.
Deputy Mayor Sobel?
One of the, and I'm sure I don't have to tell anyone this, but one of the issues with downtown that we have is that there's no place to put snow, which differs from a lot of the other commercial areas and actually differs from anywhere else in our community. There is no place for anybody to put any snow. So they can shovel all they want, but all they're doing is shoveling it into areas that are going to create problems, which is why traditionally the downtown area has become such a priority. And there was actually a policy placed, and I don't know, I doubt very much if it was a written policy, but it was an unofficial policy that once the snow started falling, and there was going to be a significant amount of snow, that signs went up downtown almost immediately, giving them a 24-hour period to clear those roads and get, that's how high a priority it was put. And once again, mostly because there's no place to put snow.
Mr. Thackeray?
Bob, some places do make special allowances, and I know we've done this in other cities, that if there's a special area, it could be assigned, you know, a higher level of service. Rather than changing the whole policy, it becomes a special or a situation. And some way, we provide that level of service, whether we do it ourselves or whether we hire ABC, XYZ to do a cleaning, clearing, whatever is desired. That has been done with some success. In some places, I think Brian and you and I have talked about it. Some DBAs do it, or they do it on contract on behalf of a local government or some other model, because it recognizes that there are some.
What's a unique situation down there?
Yeah, because in some cases, where do you pile the snow? Some cities have it, some cities don't. In this case, there's some areas here, you're just pushing it out of the street. So, you know, we could take away, if we left this, but put a qualifier in somehow, that we, and if we wanted to do a different level of service, we could cost it out. I don't think it's gonna cost us a huge amount of money, but it could be something worth looking at.
Yeah.
If you're willing to look at it. I just.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to deal. It's always been a high priority, and that's the reason. That's the only reason I bring that up is that's the reason why it's always been a high priority, is because it really does mess people up, mess our downtown businesses up, and the sooner we get to there, the sooner these people can get back to business, and that is different than any other location we have. I had one additional question, and I look forward to any unique way that you folks think that we could deal with the downtown, but I go to the fourth level, which is the non-priority roads. So just define that for me, if you could, what that means in regards to, do these roads get cleaned?
So, Your Worship, that's a great question. It's one we'll talk about a little bit more, or a lot more later, but we may as well address that now. So, the non-priority roads would not be plowed during sort of what we'll call regular snow events.
Sure.
We'll discuss sort of cases where there would be plowing done during certain high events and how council wants to define that. But during regular sort of snow events, that regular 4-inch kind of dump or something, there would be no expectations that they would be hit with the plow.
At all?
At all, yeah.
With the exception, if it's, for whatever reason, because of snow drifting, it's impassable, and we need to define that better. But if there's, because we have certain areas in town that will get drifting.
Yes.
And it, even though it's
Yeah.
only 4 centimeters, it might be a meter of drifting.
And that's,
Yeah.
you're stealing my lead here, Mark.
So I'll just, if I could, a short little anecdote. So I live on a cul-de-sac, and if fortunate, a plow will come by once a season. You know what? I'm okay with that. I get it, and I've always had the opportunity and been invited to call the town should, for some reason, the road become impassable. Then the town's been kind enough to come through and run a blade through, and I've passed that on to, of course, other homeowners as well. But the point that I'd like to make is, and I've heard from constituents, is that when the town decides what budget for snow cleaning and how much, for instance, per residence it costs, they take the total budget amount and divide by the number of houses. Yet, we have all these houses who do not see snow clearing throughout the year. And the point that is being made to me is, you know what? I pay those taxes too. That's not very fair that I do not, and I don't think anybody, I've never heard anybody say, I'm not high enough in priority. What I've heard was, I don't get any snow cleaning, period. And I'm basically one of those persons, but it really, because of where I live, it doesn't really bother me. But persons on a side road where it is difficult and the ruts become a danger, do have concerns with this. So I guess I just want to bring that concern up.
Thank you, Councillor Sobel. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I guess like one question I have is, let's say there was, say 3 centimeters or 4 centimeters dumped and it stops. How many man hours does it take to get through all these levels of priority?
Now, we'll probably don't have a hard number here, but we'll talk a bit about that. So right now, the town runs 2 plow crews?
2 plow crews, bellies. We basically have all our staff and all our equipment out when we move it, depending on the event. If it's only a dump and it's done within the period of, say, we know the weather forecast says it's only gonna be snowing for 6 hours, and we're gonna get 6 inches. We'll throw our entire crew out there as quick as possible to get that out. If we get into a situation where we're getting snow over 3 days and we're gonna get 8 centimeters today, 9 centimeters, and 10 centimeters the following day, we will spread our crews out, so we'll actually have a longer period, so we're not just running from 5 to 5. We'll be running 5 to 5, we'll run 2 segments so we get a longer period. Now if it's a really big snow event, we might split our crew into 3, right? We have enough operators so we can keep our major equipment going. But when we do that, we take off our minor equipment. So that will be coming into the procedural stuff that we get to. So in terms of that, on hard numbers, we have basically, I've merged the old public works and parks, so we have 12, 13 people out on the streets when we go, and they work all day and get it clean. So, and then we move into other areas. Every event is different. If there's high winds, we get a lot more drifting, they're out there longer. If we get up and down freezing, we get sanding that we need to do, and salting, right? So then we get our plows up, not plowing, we're sanding, right? So there's a bunch of different combinations. But I can get you better numbers next time.
If I may as well add a little bit more too, we don't, Mark, it's my understanding, use third-party contractors?
We don't use third-party contractors on the plowing right now. We use third-party contractors on snow removal. So the reason we do that is when there's a snow event, everyone else is already hired doing Walmart parking lot or whatever. So we need, anything that we do right now is basically in-house for the plowing, for that immediate priority 1, 2, and 3. So once we get past where we can't handle those events, we start looking at adding more resources to our fleet to handle that. So if we have too many priority roads, that means we'll have to have more equipment and more people.
Is it our intention to continue to use like SPR and Volker and Grays?
We use, yes, and one of the ideas that we're testing out is hiring for the next event, one time for 2nd Avenue, we'll get SBR in there to do it. The next time we'll hire Grays and get them to do it and get so we get a real sense of what the effort is, and then we can put that out for proposal next year, so they have a good sense of what that effort is, so we get some really good pricing next year for that. So that's the kind of thing that we can bring in as an idea for bringing more resources. And we also use SBR and Graves and other contractors for trucks when we have to actually haul the snow away.
How much, I guess, like, how much thought or planning is put into just the efficiency of the plowing? Like, as far as, you know, like, making sure that they're making the most use out of every minute, basically?
That, we definitely do that. That has to be linked back to the priorities. So one of the issues that James and Mr. Sobel brought up was, you know, when we have a road that's, emergency road that's 400 meters, and then the next, and that's priority one, the first priority, and the next one's up on Brent Boulevard, does he pick up the blade, drive up to Brent Boulevard and start plowing there? Or do we get him to plow all the way up to Brent, right? And we have two graders, so one's going this way, one's going that way. So those are the efficiencies, but we still, as administration and operations, we have to meet your priorities.
Is there anything to be lost by just having the blades down all the time and plowing wherever they happen to be driving?
Time.
Yeah.
Because we are not supposed to be on that road until we have 3 centimeters cleared off the priority ones,
Sure.
right? So that's where some of the linking together, we'll get into that details, but we'll come up with some recommendations. As long as it meets within these criteria, we can still make those work,
Okay.
right?
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Councillor Corbeil.
Thank you, Your Worship. And in the views of the public, they see a grader driving down the street with the blade up. Probably not something really no easy way you had to answer them as to
Well-
why, right? It is and it's not, right? It just doesn't look very good when
The
there's a
optics
grader
are-
driving right by and blades up. Anyway, did we get Volker to plow? I know that was gonna be a,
Volker, I understand, was used for hauling. We haven't retained Volker for plowing.
okay.
It's certainly under discussion, and Volker, their yard is 6 miles?
It's just up 21.
Yeah, 21.
Yeah.
I guess it goes back to, we wanna figure out what the priorities are and what the expectation of the service level, because then we would put in what we do internally as our core group, and then what we would contract to supplement from that, because then we need to figure out what that best, and like Mark said, I think getting them to do it first, and then we get better pricing, because then they know what the job is. If they come and price it cold and they don't know what that job, maybe they wouldn't give us as good a price.
I know it's gonna be a little
Not saying it's-
complicated for them anyway, because I know they were gonna have to designate their own truck for it.
Yeah.
Because I know Alberta Transportation said they wouldn't be able to use the same one that did like 817.
Right.
And I get that, but
So, yeah, we're all over it.
Yeah, okay.
It's just, if we can figure out what our standards are gonna be for which roads, then we can say, okay, this is the right equipment. Who's got the right equipment? Maybe we do, maybe we don't. We don't want to, take away from our core book of business. We wanna supplement it when we need to with the core book of business and not, and then we can be more flexible. But if we understand the 1, 2, 3, then we can figure out what the best utilization.
And one of the other priorities from what we need from council is, where are the concerns coming from? Is it that initial cleaning, the plowing, getting out there quickly and reacting? Or is it, like, the last snow was all about when it was melting and getting rid of the snow, right? So there's different, like, those Volkers would help out with that initial plowing, but wouldn't help us out with getting rid of the snow, right? So there's a balancing of those two.
I think a lot of
Councillor
problems.
Montgomery, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I think a lot of problems come from, when people are, trying to drive on their street and, like, there's ruts that are, 6 or 8 inches deep and, you're bouncing all over and, or, you can't even, like, I have a truck, thankfully, and I can put it in 4-wheel drive and I don't know how a lot of people get around sometimes, just because, it's, sometimes the roads are kind of tough to drive with just 2 wheels. So, but I don't think it's like an initial, snow removal thing sometimes. I think it's kind of the after effects once the snow has stopped falling a lot of times.
So, Your Worship, I think we can move on to that issue now. I just, would I be safe to say that sort of the committee's view there is the priorities work, however, there probably should be a separate section in the policy for downtown policies with downtown being first, second, third, and fourth. Would that be sort of my read?
Or how do we, I guess one of the questions we're gonna need is how do we define it, like from what Mr. Sobel said, it was because the downtown businesses are key to our economics, and there's no place to put the snow, so we can apply that to the extent of where we have commercial, like, 'cause I mean, we brought up at the last council about Fourth, there's some businesses in there, right? And that, like, that should, is there businesses elsewhere in that same situation that we need to be looking at? Or is it just second, third, and fourth? These are questions that, how do we define downtown?
And I think we'll bring a separate map with the
Yeah.
policy, and council can sort of define that, but I think
Yeah.
we'll take the first cut as
Yeah.
first through fourth.
If I could.
Councillor
Yeah,
Sobel.
I think second, yeah, exactly. I think second, third, and fourth. But the issue seems to, if the plows don't go by there, if the grader doesn't go by there, and this includes for local roads as well, it's exactly what happens. You either ice that road up, if it's not cleared off properly, or you get ruts. And those are the two killers for everybody. And those are if you look at all the complaints that we're getting, those are vast majority of the complaints that we've received in regards to the last one. It was the ruts and the ice.
Mr. Thackeray?
Like, Bob, he wants to look at some conceptual pricing to, like, it could be 3 days after an event, but if there was some way to supplement to go and clean up like the last event, there's a lot of these things, there was freezing rain, thawed, then it froze over,
Yeah.
thawed, it just created skating rinks, and like you say, if we didn't have four-wheel drive with snow tires, not a good scene if you're in a low-profile car with summer tires or all season, but it's still weird. For us to look at that and see, I mean, I
We can come up with something,
come
yeah.
up with some ideas around that,
Yeah.
and see, like,
Like if it's kind of within the realm of like kind of responsible to cost, yeah, I almost feel like once the priorities are taken care of, then everything else should get hit basically after that.
we could look at that.
Yeah, so getting hit and plowing this stuff after the priorities is one of the issues we find in local residents, which is a concern, when we bring a plow down there and we don't remove it, we end up windrowing and blocking people's driveways. And unfortunately, when we do it 3 days after, that turns into cement. And unfortunately, I don't know about you, but unless you have a heavy piece of equipment, you're not getting through that. And we don't currently, so we've involved probably in some wing wall graders and a few different things, but they can be done. But that's the issue why we don't go down there to plow, because when we do plow the roads, we get all these phone calls in saying, I can't get out of my driveway.
Or it could be something, like, there are some other treatments though,
Yeah.
that, depending on the temperature of the surface, if the temperature's right, you can brine it and/or you can sand salt, at some points. But I guess what I'm hearing you say though is what can we do in the instances when you got a few days after, okay, everybody's in the same boat, we only have so much equipment, how do we go and attack it in an efficient way without costing a lot of money? I think this is what you're.
That's it.
Easy
Well, go shake down money for you again.
Yeah, your worship as well. There's sort of a difference in, I learned this too, between snow plowing, which is sort of hitting it with the plow, and removal. So right now, as Mark says, we don't plow local roads. However, there are cases where we remove from local roads, and that's a longer process and requires different equipment. But so part of the reason that we talk about setting that local road priority without plowing, which is just that grader coming down, but then we start talking about sort of the local road service would be snow removal instead, to avoid that. And it especially becomes an issue in cul-de-sacs, where there's no real good, so.
That's fine.
Like I definitely see the point about like creating the windrows, but what about if like we didn't necessarily plow down to the asphalt and we just kind of knock the bumps off, or fill the ruts in kind of thing?
The difference between plowing and grading.
Yeah, kind of grading, I guess, more than plowing.
It's not 50.
Councillor Cox, did you have a point or a question you wanted to make?
Yeah, I just think that you're opening a huge can of worms, because then you're gonna talk about who gets priority on those, all those roads. Like, how are you gonna pick? How are you gonna decide? I think leave it as is.
I just had a general question which might influence policy as you go year to year, and that is, if we had a very mild winter and we're way under budget, what happens then? Is there, and there's no carryover into the next year?
Right?
We've actually established a snow, we want to establish a snow reserve, if you will. So when you get those down here, you have something, you have a bit of a war chest. I mean, we already do with our unattributed surplus, is what we would use anyway, because that's what the town's used in the past for what they call stabilization. But we could actually dedicate a reserve, we'd actually like to put some local reserve funds together for council as part of our financial plan.
Is that something that'll come into budget next year that we'll bring forward?
If you'd like us to fast track it, or you want to bring it forward sooner.
No, I was just wondering if that's something you would bring to budget 2019 in the fall when we meet.
Certainly can. How do you guys feel about it?
Deputy Mayor Sobel?
No, well, I
Oh.
wasn't on that, your worship, but I think it's something to.
I think it would be wise
discuss, yeah.
to be able to build up some kind of reserve, then if you really hit hard with a bad winter, you can dip into that and address the public's needs and concerns. Deputy Mayor
What I did
Sobel.
want to say, though, your worship, I think it's important to remember that we don't live in Victoria or some of those great places in British Columbia where it never snows, but I think one of the biggest priorities that we have to look at, always remember, is that we have to be focusing on safety when we're dealing this. And when we get these ruts, like, there's no, I don't know how you can mandate this or make, it's very difficult to make rules on this because things change so fast.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
we
yeah.
have different kinds of snow, we have rain, we have the whole gamut here. This is Canada, this, not that British Columbia is not Canada.
I would like to agree with the elderly member that Canada starts at home.
But there has to be some common sense used here too. And when there's ruts and I think that was the issue that we had. There was no action being taken on a lot of these roads that had these ruts, and that's where our complaints came in. Most people understand that our public works personnel have a hard job. Our snow cleaning is not the easiest thing in the world, and I think they're willing to appreciate that. But at some point, there has to be some progress made. If there's 7 days, there's a week without snow, and we're still looking at icy 6-inch ruts, that's very hard to explain.
But that goes back to the comment about if we set up a winter reserve.
Yes.
Then you can hit those things, because you got a bit extra flex, and we could do that, or potentially do it, and depending on what we could do.
Yeah.
Why don't we look at that?
And I think there's two issues there. I think that you're absolutely correct. One of the other issues there was we were getting it in some areas, but other areas weren't seeing it, right? So we weren't communicating
Yeah.
as a department that we were out. Sorry, we weren't.
You were killing me, Mark.
But we were on that last one, I was feeling your thunder, sorry, Ryan.
I'm never giving you my slides in advance again.
But we were in some areas, but there was 4 major really concerns that we got through these citizen communications forums, and we got lots of complaints in certain areas, so we were prioritized in certain areas, and we hired contractors, but we only had 2 crews, and we still had 4 areas, so obviously those 2 other areas got to it, but it was the next day. So there was a communication gap there for sure, but I do, that budget and having that ability for us to make that call and say, like, I agree, safety shouldn't be a money issue with safety.
Are we okay with Ryan carrying on now? Everybody's,
No, apparently Jennifer wants us to make a motion.
oh, do we need, okay.
We have to come out of committee of the whole? Oh, no.
So I'm looking for a motion to come out of committee of the whole.
I shall move, your worship.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Sobel. All in favor of coming out of committee of the whole? And then we are looking for a motion to extend the meeting to tomorrow. Is it a half an hour? We have 1 hour. So I'm looking for a motion to extend the meeting for up to 1 hour.
I move that, your worship.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. All in favor? Let the show begin.
Move to go back into committee of the
Oh,
whole.
yes, thank you
Yeah.
for correcting me there. And you've all heard the mission, this is a mission. All heard the motion to go back into committee of the whole. All in favor? Thank you.
Your worship, so with regards to local road service, and Councillor Shovel's absolutely correct. Every snow event is different, and one of the frustrations we've had putting together a policy is trying to describe that. So to an extent, the policy will have arbitrary numbers. And the purpose of these numbers is to set the servicing level and also to be defensible in case of a liability issue. The town can say, this is our level of service, we achieve this, ergo, our liability's covered. So I think we'll take some of this with a grain of salt. Like, for example, one of the struggles we had was defining what the term impassable means for local roads. And that is a vastly different thing, vastly depending on snow conditions. However, there was a requirement for certainly a number here to make a defensible sort of thing. So what we chose here is we went out and spec'd and then measured the ground clearance of a Ford Crown Victoria, which is 5.6 inches or 14.5 centimeters. Made sure I did check that math before James gets on me. To provide that definition of what impassable is. And sort of anything above that, then crews come out, on even on a local road, crews come out to either knock it down or remove, depending on the road. Anything sort of below that, we'd get to on sort of a complaint basis, but it wouldn't be on a proactive basis. So that's sort of the definition that staff put together for impassable, with the recognition that it is on the arbitrary side.
And I guess 14.5 centimeters of compacted ruts, or, like, that would be ruts, it would be compacted snow, but, if it's 14.5 centimeters, that's like 6 inches of powder, that's not impassable, right? Like, we just wanna get something, so when we say, it says currently in the policy, the operation manager can make a call if it's impassable. But I got one guy goes, well, my traffic can make it through, but my son's lowered Civic.
Yeah.
And with the summer tires can't get through, so it's impassable for him, so you should be out here cleaning my road.
So the goal of putting a number to that isn't so much to say we will never service places at 14 centimeters. It's just to begin to give the town something beyond just, giving that guidance, giving us some sort of framework to make a call rather than, and there will be language in the policy as well allowing the manager of operations to make a call, but simply that defensible sort of policy is, staff are sort of going to suggest that 14.5 centimeters, it's, a reasonable sized car.
Unless council believes it should
Yeah.
be a different vehicle, we should be going to.
All right. Probably the next one that comes up a lot is with regards to sidewalks, pathways, and even sort of travel lanes in town parking lots. And received a number of calls on this as well. Our manager of operations has advised this is where a lot of the complaints about slip and falls come. So while there's the big road and traffic safety, the pedestrian safety seems to generate a lot of the slip and fall liability. So with regards to sidewalk and pathways, town puts that requirement on local residents to clear within 48 hours of a snow event ending. So those of you with sidewalks have to get out and shovel. The town doesn't currently have any sort of commitment on its own part. Recognizing, of course, that the town starts service sort of immediately when a snow event begins. As Mark sort of alluded to, when we do attack It's one group of crews now. So when we're attacking sidewalks and pathways, that means they're not attacking streets. So just looking to gauge council's general sentiment with regards to sidewalks and pathways.
Deputy Mayor Sobel?
Can't stop myself. But he's asking a question, so.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I will say over the last few years, I would say, maybe even longer, I've always been so impressed with the fact that you get up after a storm and I mean, everything's haywire, and I look and the paths are clear. And I'm amazed, and the positive feedback I get from residents who are so thankful to have those pathways cleared, because for a lot of people, they can't walk down the sidewalk. If they're gonna walk, and some people, you know, there's a lot of people don't have vehicles, they can't do sidewalks because they're not clear, and people sometimes take all of the 48 hours to get their sidewalks clear, and that's fine, but the pathways are clear, and that gives them some ability to go places. So I'm so impressed with that. I really do not, you know, once again, I understand the importance of the snow clearing in our high priority areas, but if we can keep that policy that we've had going, you know, I just think it's impressive, and I think it's a good thing for our residents.
Councillor Peterson?
So I've heard the same comments of Councillor Sobel, but I also heard what you just said. If we have people on pathways, we don't have them on roads. We don't have them on streets. I think that's problematic. So maybe we have to have priority pathways as well. Because we do have priority pathways that bring people down, especially into the downtown to work. I'm just saying, I don't know. Might be an idea.
Yeah, if I could pick up on that, I think if we could delineate between, you know, recreational pathways versus ones that are kind of transporting people to jobs or to other services like that. I think it's more important to get, you know, sidewalks, say, cleared to downtown rather than, you know, like the path around Kinsman Lake, for instance.
So for example, the pathway that goes along Wheatland Trail would be considered a priority pathway? Thomas Drive?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
So we can attach that as part of the policy. But if I may, and I don't like to paraphrase council, but I do see there's a degree of satisfaction with the current level of service, but just a sort of emphasis that we do have to prioritize, and that safety first and moving from there.
Councillor Bauer?
Your Worship, I would just like to ask a question regarding sidewalk clearing. One of the questions that I fielded during the recent snow storm, the event that we had, was that people were putting the snow and clearing from their driveways and their sidewalks onto the roads, and then expecting the town to clear that in addition to their own. And now that was a very big thing because it caused a lot of ruts, and because of the warming and thawing, it also created additional problems for us that were then put onto our shoulders rather than the homeowners. What is the current policy with regards to snow removal on garage surfaces and sidewalks?
Councillor Bauer, it's funny you mentioned that because we've talked about that a lot today. There is a bylaw prohibiting that. However, it's not one that is enforced to any strong extent, and frankly, it's not one that's popular to enforce. So it is one that probably we do need to talk to bylaw enforcement about, as well as really communicating that, I think. And that's sort of the very last slide I have is talking about that is, you know, because I think a lot of people aren't aware on that, and if I'm being completely honest, I've been guilty of shoveling my driveway out into the city street before. Oh, and that's on camera too. So I think it's one that needs some communication, and then even probably some public enforcement to remind people that, you know, goes onto the side of your driveway or onto your lawn.
Well, that's gonna wreck the snow angels with the snowblowers.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer. Did you want to add anything
I
else?
just want to say one more thing, please, Your Worship. I'd just like to say that education is always my comfort zone. And so in this instance, I would like to almost do a fan out or a public service that this is our intent, is to really make sure that the public knows that snow removal needs to be on their properties and not onto the town, to help the town make a better job. Yeah.
Absolutely, Your Worship, and that's sort of probably the last big issue on this, and probably one that the town really does need to improve, I think in all aspects, is that communication, and both sort of that, what I'll call aspect one communications, which is the communiques that go out. I think everybody knows now I've stepped out from behind the podium and I'm talking with my hands again. Those snow event communications, so that's sort of the social media blasts. We're clearing now, your business is on this priority street, that really instant communications that come during snow events. But then also really doing those, what we'll call the aspect two, I like my names, that ongoing public information. And that's sort of starting towards the tail end of fall, going all year in town inserts, press releases, messaging on the website, social media, all of that, just sort of telling folks what the town's snow policies are, what bylaw things like that are, what the road priorities are, just sort of that ongoing, constant. They say you have to hear something, 11 times before it sinks in. So that continual messaging, not just during snow events, but really starting when the leaves start to turn red and kind of going all the way through. So that will sort of form part of that policy, is that dual aspect, that up-to-the-minute communication and then that ongoing communication.
Thank you, Ryan.
Education, I guess.
Thank you, Councillor Bauer.
So I think that sort of concludes the key questions staff were looking to council for. I think that's given great direction to Mark and Craig as they put together the policy. And we should be able to have something ready for January 2018 for council to adopt, and we can start rolling out communications based on that. Are there sort of any other?
Thank you for your report, and thank you for your hard work, Mark and Ryan, and welcome to our staff, Craig. We hope that things will be smoother as we go along, and we'll go on to the next point. 6.5, Council Strategic Planning Session, Possible Venues, page 25. Ms.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Sawatsky.
So at our last committee of the whole meeting, council discussed their schedule, and as part of their schedule, the strategic planning session is coming up. There's been a lot of talk around the strategic planning session, and a lot of matters being referred to it. In discussion with council at the last council meeting, there were some dates kind of thrown around when the strategic planning session could happen. And the last week in January was identified as a week that could possibly work for council. So we've researched a few options in and around the area and outside of the area for council to consider to hold, for a venue to hold their strategic planning session. So I've just put some information at council's desk on some of the places that we have looked into. I'll let you know that we did look, tried to find a venue close to town. We looked at a guest ranch. It just wouldn't work logistically for us. We also looked at a facility in Speargrass that is not open for the winter. So we came up with three other options for council to consider. Of course, there's always the option to stay in Strathmore for their strategic planning session and use a local venue here. But there's three that we've looked into outside of our area. The first is the crossing at Ghost River. Administration has used this facility in the past to hold our strategic planning sessions. It's very conducive to the kind of session that we could see council holding. The idea would be to spend 2 days or an overnight stay at that facility. There's shared common space there, and there's overnight facilities available at the same location. So that's one spot. The next we looked at the lodge at Kananaskis. That venue, is available January 30th and 31st. That's also including an overnight stay for all of council. And it also has the facilities that we could need. And then finally, we looked at a facility in Calgary, the Coast Plaza Hotel. We didn't include overnight stays at that facility because it was so close to town. And that is available January 30th and 31st. It would be 2 days, but council would come back home at that facility. So that's the information we're providing to you for your discussion.
Sorry, what was the dates of the Ghost River one?
So Ghost River is available January 29th and 30th. And then the other two facilities were available January 30th and 31st.
Any comments or questions from councillors?
What was the cost between, like, say, the first two?
So the cost between the first two is between $4,000 to $5,000 for council. Yes.
It's kind of the same, and if you did it in town, it'd be somewhere in the same ballpark.
Yeah. In town, you're looking probably around like 2 to 3.
No comments or questions from council? So this is something where you want direction from us, I imagine.
Yeah. Council, so we have the strategic planning session planned for that last week.
Yeah.
So we need to know where we're going to go.
I have a question which might help in my decision, and that is I was invited to or made aware of the Bow River Phosphorus Group meeting, which is at the county office on January 30th. So I could go to that, that's Bow River Management regarding phosphorus, but I could also change the date and go to another location, which is on a different date than the 30th. Right now, the county office has it on January 30th, but that's right when our strategic planning is. That being said, I'm pretty sure I can change that around. It's just a matter of location, and if the price is pretty even, it would just come down to council's priorities as to where they'd like to be, if the price isn't that much of a factor. Councillor, God bless you, Councillor Peterson.
I would just make a suggestion that having the experience of being at these places and knowing what they do, that this is an administration, a place where administration has more expertise in knowing, and you'll be delivering the construct around which the planning occurs. So I'd be happy to take the recommendation. But the other thing I think that we should do, I think that strategic planning is the priority, that it has to be done, and thinking about the time of year and where we're going, that we should have a local backup plan.
So, I guess we talked about this ourselves, and, you know, I think for consideration, the Ghost River facility is actually built to house corporate nonprofit,
Yeah.
government groups to do workshops and sessions, and it's purpose-built. It's a training type of facility. No other place is like it. It's a little bit out of the way. It's just outside Cochrane, so it's in the area, but it's actually built for this. So that'd be our recommendation. We think it's good value, and it does interfere with, you know, it meets the principal need. Having said that, we can't really pick what you want to do, and we're not here to tell you what to do, far from it. We're just here to provide our advice. We've talked to some other organizations that have used it, and they've used it to really good use, because it's just a little bit off the grid.
Councillor Peterson, did you want to add anything?
I would move, your worship, the council hold a strategic planning, we ought to
Oh, we
move.
can't.
Never mind.
Have consensus if you want. Or you can refer it to council and say, then you can resolve.
Is there time enough if it's put forward to December 20th meeting to come for a motion? Is there still time?
Why don't we just, if we have consensus here, let's do it.
Yeah. I'm fine with the crossing.
Can I ask a question first? Is it possible to do the crossing one on the 30th, 31st, rather than the 29th?
I'm sorry, I'm not too sure. My direction was to look for the 29th and 30th, but I can get back to you, to council.
Well, I have a tentative thing on the 29th. If I have to get rid of it, I could. But if we could do the 30th and 31st, that'd be great. Yeah, and only if it's convenient for everybody else, of course, too, so.
Deputy Mayor Sobel?
Just, do you know what the room costs are at the crossing?
Yes. So the cost per room is $157 per person.
Are you looking for a consensus? Everybody has to say yes or no.
We looked at local too, it's about $140.
So that would be obviously staying the night. Is everyone on council convinced that you need to stay overnight somewhere for the strategic planning? I know we've talked in the past about staying in your own homes, and some people aren't that willing or interested in staying somewhere else. The cost factor doesn't seem to be an issue this time as far as where we're going.
If it helps, Your Worship. I did find those articles, I just forgot to send them to you, that Councillor Sobel mentioned, that speak to why we should go out of, why it's good to go away, why it's important for councils to seek a place of no distraction.
Well, I'm going to surprise you, Councillor Peterson, but I would be willing to go along with that for this strategic planning. I want it to be a success, and if those readings point to that, then I'd be willing to go along with it. I think it's reasonable as far as the price compared to in town, and if it's someplace close, it could be very workable.
So I suggest we seek a consensus, Your Worship.
Okay. Do you need a show of hands for a consensus? A straw vote? How many would be interested in the crossing? So the consensus is the crossing. We'll go for that. And then you'll check into the dates regarding Councillor Montgomery's concerns or question. All right. Ms. Sawatsky.
Can I ask, is the 30th and 31st okay for everyone as well?
Yep.
Yes.
That's the 23rd.
Yep. Okay. That was painful, but it's over. 6.6, CRP meeting scheduled December 15th, 2017. Mr. Thackeray?
This was just put on we met last Friday with the chair, Mayor Bill Robertson from Okotoks, and their Colleen Shepherd. They are recommending a transition process, which is attached in your package, and what they see the go forward would be for the CRP, which would be essentially transitioning the programs and some dollars to the Growth Management Board organization. They believe they have, if I remember, Pat, it was like 1.6?
Yeah, I think it was that amount.
It was that amount that they would be willing to move, because the money did originate from the province. And that would take the programs too, along with it, which would make some sense. There certainly is value. There's a lot of research and data that would be of value to us, particularly with, I think, any commuter transit type of issues and information. There's some really valuable information there. Whatever the go forward would be, we don't want to lose that information. I think it's pretty important stuff that we've put a lot of money and time into. There's also some ED information as well as a lot of infrastructure information. So, just putting it to council if they, anything otherwise, because you're attending tomorrow, on the Friday.
Friday, yep.
And so, but I
So
think I
just-
don't want to lose sight of we participated in some stuff here, like on it, and we got
Yeah.
some grant money, and I just, also for the new council that weren't part of it, I think it's pretty vital that we still keep our, as you rightly pointed out, you guys, it was really important for us to keep our interest in that and make sure that that isn't lost and those programs don't get lost somehow.
Deputy Mayor Sobel?
Just to add to that, James, so there were some, as James just alluded to, there were some really important and complicated programs that were put on by CRP in the last few years. One of the things that's going to be determined at this meeting coming up on the 15th is whether or not they should make an attempt to continue on with those programs, in spite of the fact that they most probably will end as a organization, but that to acquire the board's permission to apply to the Growth Management Board to continue on with these programs.
If I may, there's one other key part. They cannot move the money to us.
No.
They are legally prevented from doing that because of the way they're structured under the Society Act, and because of their corporate nature. They can't. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to conclude, it's, I think it's, oh, sorry, Councillor Peterson, I didn't see your light on.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we do have, even though we can't recoup it to this body, we have quite a bit of skin in this game still.
Yes.
I guess having, sat at this council table for 4 years and a bit, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this as an agenda item, about what CRP has brought to us. I don't have a good perspective on that. I certainly can see quickly what it's brought to Airdrie and Okotoks and Cochrane, and even further out, High River, Longview, City of Calgary for sure. I saw potential coming this way, maybe for the first time ever, in a transportation study. So I guess my question is, I'm not all that hopeful that we're ever going to realize any benefit, except to see our neighbors benefit more, which I don't really have a huge objection to. But if there's an opportunity for us, for this money to come back into this community in some form, that's a consideration I'd like to see. Because even if it can't come to this body, that your corporate structure doesn't prevent it going other places.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why Colleen and Bill said that they want the funding and the corporate documents and that history to go to the regional going forward, rather than just wind up and they're done. They're wrong with the 1.6 million. I think we'd be losing a lot if we just let it go. But the growth board ultimately still has to be the.
I understand that.
And I don't know, I think Colleen shared that there was a lot of support for this in CRP, but it's gonna be discussed on Friday. So it's not complete yet, but I think that was a consensus there. Bill was feeling good about it, I think.
Deputy Mayor
So
Sobel?
just two very quick points. One is the, in the study that was done for transportation, of the three communities that was done, Chestermere, Cochrane, and Strathmore, there was a comment made by Colleen that the response from Strathmore was far and above anybody else's. It was an extremely, extremely strong response, positive response in regards to it. Second of all, I am optimistic about that solely for the reason that our meetings with Minister Mason, and I've been to 3 of them in regards to transportation. This man is a proponent of regional transportation. He's very, very strong on it. So we've got that going for us going in. And I am optimistic that the transportation end of CRP is going to continue through the Growth Management Board.
Well,
I could be wrong. I've
If
been
I
wrong
can,
before.
might respond, Your Worship, that transportation project, and I certainly know that our community was hugely invested, and it is the sole grace of our relationship with CRP. And so I'm happy with your representation of this council in that, and I leave you to it. But I'm,
I think you're
I also want to
absolutely.
follow the money.
I think you're absolutely right, Councillor Peterson. If there's a takeaway that we can get for our community, it's the lessons learned and the information we've gotten. Deputy Mayor Sobel has been a real big part of the regional transportation study. We've seen how it can work really well in other communities, and I think you're absolutely right. It could have worked really well here. Maybe in the long-term future, well, not that far off, we can actually start to look at revisiting something like this. But we were held back in the past, for sure. So, we'll be attending on Friday, and we'll try to bring you some information back as soon as we can. Which brings us to item 6.7, Kinsman Diamond, page 94. This was something that originally came from me in the form of an email to Mr. Thackeray, and then we had discussed that it would come forward to Committee of the Whole. There was some interest. I had met informally with most of the Strathmore Minor Ball Association, and they had some questions concerning Kinsman Diamond, basically along the lines of that they're very close to being able to hold high-quality tournaments like the Western Nationals, Western Finals, sorry. And if Kinsman Diamond was fixed to a certain level or levels, they'd be able to host Westerns with Fairfield in Cheadle. One of the concerns was, or one of the questions was, if there's any way to get lighting there. So these, you see the points that were brought forward in our informal discussion, and Mr. Thackeray felt it would be a good idea to bring them forward into a committee of the whole. So are there any comments, or?
Is there support to do this?
Councillor Corbeil.
The lighting is not inexpensive, but it would be great.
If I could just, one of the reasons I brought it forward was after informally meeting, and they brought these concerns, we had discussed, and I talked with other councillors at different times, and we talked about how Kinsman Lake Park is amazing. It's one of the most beautiful things that the town has to offer, and then Kinsman Diamond, which is right there, is part of the park, almost part of the park. It is not at the level that it could be to be a really good venue for baseball as we move forward. So that's why, one of the reasons. Councillor Corbeil. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bauer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was going to echo that point that you just made about it being a showpiece of our town, and that it would be very nice to see lights there. But I would like to ask, what's the economic benefit that we see from holding the Western Finals?
That's a good question. I hadn't been given any information as far as numbers of families who might be involved or where they would stay as far as motels. They did tell me that up till now, a lot of families have stayed in Calgary as well as Strathmore, but I don't have any hard numbers to show what the economics would be. Basically, it was more along the lines of improving Kinsman to a certain level would allow them to chance to bid for something like Westerns, and then I'd imagine that they'd be able to provide more of a financial picture as they apply for an event like that. Councillor, is that okay?
I would be for that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brower. Councillor Corbeil.
Okay, both fields have no lights, is that right?
Yes, as far as I know, Fairfield has no lights. It
Okay.
is supposed to be an amazing diamond. I
Yes.
haven't seen it.
I have been to quite a few ball tournaments and played in quite a few ball tournaments where they rent lights. Like, even if that could be an option. But I'm on board for fixing up Kinsman for sure.
Okay. Any other comments from councillors? Councillor Montgomery.
As with most other things, I support it because I believe there would be a return on investment, and I think in the long run it would pay for itself plus more. So,
Thank you, Councillor Montgomery. Deputy Mayor Sobel.
And I agree. And the other thing I want to add is I've had interaction with some of the people that do work for and are involved very heavily with the minor ball, and this is a group that I always had the impression is more than willing to meet us halfway down along the road. And you can read by the comments that are made here that, you know, they're not looking for dugouts, they can get by with dugouts. I mean, all they want is a fair shot at this, and I think we've kind of missed the boat on a couple of occasions to provide them some assistance. I don't think their requests are, I mean, the only one that's a little out there is the request for lights, but I would love to see lights there. I mean, there's nothing, how neat is it to go and watch a game at night? I think it'd be a great attraction for our community, and I think, as Councillor Montgomery just said, I think the benefits are long time.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Sobel. And just while we're on that topic with Mark being here, I don't know if you've seen the email, the copy of the email, but they had a question about, as we retire or get rid of ride-on mowers, is there an opportunity that they could be considered to purchase or get it at a reduced rate if it's going to a nonprofit association like Strathmore Minor Ball? They said they'd be willing to do maintenance, store it, use it themselves. So it's something that we can keep on our radar, maybe. Councillor Cox.
So I just wanted to add to that. I am in support of this, but I want to make sure that we don't drop the ball. I'm not in
No pun
support.
intended.
So to speak, I'm tired, getting tired.
I do not want to see us do part of it and not all of it. I believe if we're going to do it, let's do it right and get it done.
Mr. Thackeray?
I'd say you're looking to bring it up to with lights, probably within the 100,000 range with lighting, with proper lighting.
So that's just for the lighting? Or is that to build it up the way they're talking here?
I don't know enough of the details
Okay.
to comment, but I do know the lights add, it is, we could spend $300,000-400,000 per diamond doing a lit diamond easily. So it's already there, so the heavy work's done, but we don't know what the power is, we don't know how much it will cost. So I'm just pulling a number out of the air saying, if you're comfortable with $100,000, we can add that to the budget, but I would qualify that to say, we'd have to go and do a little bit of work to work up the number, but at least it would be a placeholder in the budget. But I can't promise you that it's definitely not gonna be low. But if the ball club, and I do believe the ball club is good to help out, and we're certainly, that would be great, and sometimes they can get things we can't.
So maybe we could, at this stage, we could leave it with admin to contact Strathmore Minor Ball and look at,
They can also apply for grants.
yes.
So do you want us to put a placeholder in and then subject to council's final decision? Then at least there's something in the budget, there's something to work on it, and then we can come back in January, say first committee in January, we can talk about all the people, that we're getting into close to Christmas.
Right.
Would that be agreeable?
I think so.
Like to your point, Terry, we don't lose sight of the project,
Mhm.
and we want to do it right. We have bad reputation for doing stuff that isn't robust, that sometimes it costs too much, and it's not quality. We want quality, low price, good quality, good product.
Okay. Councillor Peterson?
So I think that in relation to what Councillor Montgomery said and others, that until we know what can be realized, from this, because there's no guarantee they're going to bring in better tournaments, but we can take a chance on them. So I'd be more than willing to meet them halfway. And the other thing I think that we could look at, and I don't know what the logistics are around this, but I know that Minor Ball is very, very good at fundraising. They've been really, really proactive, and if we could meet them halfway and whatever, and even if we had to do it over 2 years, I don't know if that would make any difference, or over 3 years.
And that could be great. Maybe in dialogue with them, following Councillor Peterson's comments, maybe the start would be the lawn mower, the watering, the dugout improvement, and then we look at the lighting at a little later stage when we know more about partnering and pricing.
Well, and even if we could look at a 3-year plan for a really good upgrade.
Mhm.
There is there's some pretty good realizations, $130 per person on looking on the tourism economic, right, you know, for people coming into town.
I guess what I don't know is I don't know what I don't know, and I don't know where the power is and how we get the power. That's where the big cost goes. The light standards, that's the cheap part. The cool thing could be is if we could work it with Fortis, when Fortis comes in and replaces all the lights in the park next year, we could get better pricing on it, because the labor, it's a labor, that's the big cost.
Yeah, I think there's a couple, like Fortis, we're meeting in January about Kinsman Park lights, early in January.
But as soon as we call it Fortis Field, it'll be fine.
And then, and the other thing, I think there's
got a ring.
communication, some of those other things. I'm just, like, I could contact, we have EXP who did downtown, we have landscape architects that do these ball diamonds, and they're currently engaged with that. It's not related to the downtown, but I do have we could get taking that list and get them to look at that and get us some real pricing for that. I think that would be helpful. I think that fairly quickly.
So we can just leave that with admin and Mark and your staff?
Yeah, if we could, we'll make it, I'd like to make a note of that, if that's okay, or
Sure.
that it should be part of the budget.
Okay.
So council.
Need the motion.
Discuss a motion, we'll put that in the budget.
Deputy Mayor Sobel. Oh,
He wants to move something.
Councillor Cox?
Your worship, I move that we add an item on,
Can't do
I
motion.
move that we move out of committee of the whole.
So you want to rise and report?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a motion to rise and report from Councillor Peterson. You've heard the motion, all in favor? And Councillor Peterson? Oh, Councillor Cox.
now I can move it? I move that we add an agenda item for the baseball field at Kinsman Park
Bring forward a budget.
to be brought forward in our budget.
Okay, so like a placeholder then. You've heard the motion from Councillor Cox. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
We were thinking, it's just really late.
And then we need a motion to go back into committee of the whole? No.
No, I think we're done.
We're done.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion
A motion to go into.
in camera. Okay, so we have a motion to go in camera. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? We are now in camera.